Hello there, and welcome to the Unspoken Rush, an unscripted exploration into a topic that has parents worried and their kids hooked. My name's Billy, and I work as a counsellor and community engagement coordinator with Relationships Australia within the Gambling Help Service. And also here we have Katie.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm one of the practitioners in the Gambling Help Service in the West at Relationships Australia.
And also introducing our lovely panellists who will be feeding through today's webinar session.
Hi everyone, I'm Bianca. I'm the one of the peer support workers for Relationships Australia, South Australia. I have a lived experience of gambling harm that I'm in recovery from.
Hi, and I'm James. I'm an IT professional working at RASA, supporting almost 400 staff with their infrastructure and systems, and I'm a gamer of about 2 decades worth of experience.
And off screen today we have Simon, our digital interface master, who will be helping us navigate through today's webinar session and answering any IT related questions you might have and feeding through some of the Q&A questions we're going to be feeding back about later on today. As we gather here virtually, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Kaurna land, the traditional land and stolen land of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I'd like to pay respects to the elders, past, current and emerging. And also recognise that we have some international guests and representation here today, and that their relative Indigenous elders are worth noting and paying respect to. Our session here today will cover a few different topic areas. We're going to tell you a little bit about our project and its evolution. We're going to screen 2 films which we recorded and produced as part of this project. One themed around gambling and the next around gaming. And then leave room to connect with you, the viewers, to hear a bit about what you think, as well as chiming in with our lived experience panelists and sharing a little bit about their thoughts and experiences on these 2 provocative and evocative themes. We're also kicking off a series of webinar sessions today. So as part of Gambling Harm Awareness 2020, we're the first off the run of several webinar sessions. And I'd just quickly like to draw your attention to the fact that throughout the week, we'll be screening another couple. We have Understanding Gaming Through the Eyes of Young People taking place tomorrow at 1 p.m. We've got Gaming, Gambling, What's the Difference? Taking place next week, Tuesday on the 24th, 4 p.m. We also have Lee, the Lived Experience in Gambling video taking place next week, Friday at 1 p.m. And then also a series of peace multicultural information sessions, which will be delivered in multiple culturally and linguistically diverse languages. So, getting stuck into our webinar session today. Katie, can you tell us a little bit about how this project started, evolved, and who we connected with to make it all happen?
I'd love to, Billy. So this all started with our funders, the Office of Problem Gambling, reaching out to our management at Relationships Australia and asking us to put something together that was going to be accessible. And now we can see with a lot of insight as to the reasons why we've done a webinar, that we're still able to bring you this information online. And so we were tasked with the mission in the West team to bring information to you, the public and professionals, about youth around the theme of gambling can happen anywhere. And that's when the exciting stuff started to happen. So we went into this with a real mission around raising awareness around the harms of gambling and gaming for families and individuals and communities. But in that real Relationships Australia mindset of understanding that there are real positives that happen for people as well around these areas, which can bring a really conflicting space for people. And it can mean it creates a topic that can leave people feeling overwhelmed on how to address it, but also a bit lost on where to start. So with that in mind, and after a couple of amazing brainstorming sessions, we came up with the idea of using an iconic Australian TV show that basically takes on similar challenging themes that we're taking on today with youth. And they do this by asking people head on what their experiences are around different topics. And that's what we did. We wanted to go to youth and we wanted to find out what they thought about gaming and gambling and what did they know. And to do that, we got a really exciting link up with True North Theatre Company, an amazing group of teens and organisation that has a real co-creation aspect to it and offer a real vehicle for social change through theatre. So we invited youth to come and participate with very little information because we didn't want them to research or have insight. We wanted those really raw and unscripted responses. And this is what you're going to see today. So the first video we're going to show you is around gambling. And this is what the youth at True North Theatre Company said.
What is gambling?
Gambling
for me is
Where you play games with money, I guess.
it comes in different forms like racing,
pokies, scratching,
card
slot
games.
machines.
If you lose money. If you win, you gain money from other people.
You have more chances of being eaten by a shark than probably winning the lottery.
I mean, maybe.
It is something that can quite quickly become an addiction. A lot of people get into it thinking it'll be fine, it'll be fun, they won't do it much, and then it quickly becomes a habit and can be a problem for some people.
It's an addiction to losing money because you're not going to win.
I see it as more of a loss of money, just you're risking something that you don't really have to risk.
What would your life be like if you gambled every day?
I think if I gambled every day, there would be more risk than profit.
I think I would be looking for every opportunity to try and win back the money that I'm spending and throwing away.
Yeah, you'd start building a habit.
I think I would probably end up in a bad position financially and probably mentally as well.
I'm the same with my phone. Like, you wake up, you go on your phone. If you've got an app for gambling on there, it's very easy if that was an everyday life thing.
There would be a lot less time for the things that are important, investing in the people in your life.
Family, friends.
Yeah, family could tend to feel really neglected when there's someone with a gambling addiction.
Is gambling designed to be addictive?
I would say to a certain degree, yes.
Things like bright flashing lights and colours, they attract your attention.
It's a business. There's a lot of business around gambling, and they've got a thrill on it to think, oh, maybe this time, maybe once more.
It's a scary thing almost to talk about, or not talk about, but to do.
The ads as well are making it look like oh wow, you have so much chance of winning, but and then right at the end it's this really, really quick voice saying gamble responsibly. Like, that's not going to stop people from gambling unresponsibly. Yes, it's made to be addictive. That's how they make their money.
When did you first find out about it?
I don't remember because it's just been there since I was born.
I'd say about 6.
I learned about it from parents when we would go out to pubs or something like that.
But I remember family dinners out at the pub. A few family members would disappear into the pokies room.
I had parents that were very, got addicted to gambling. I think I first became aware at school because we would play these gambling games more so where it'd be like a roll of a dice and see how high your score can get. And I was always the kid that didn't stop. So I've learned very quickly that gambling's not for me.
How would you do it without other people knowing?
I think when people have an addiction, they can go to great lengths to keep it to themselves.
There's a lot of apps and sites that you can easily have access to on your phone, like Sportsbet.
I think with technology now, to a certain extent, it'd be okay, especially if you're not sharing your finances. I think you could definitely be sneaky about it.
What kind of person could find themselves in over their heads?
I think you have an addictive personality. There is that aspect of it's really easy to just go out with mates. You know, you've gone down to the pub, hey, let's put a bet on this horse, and then you've gone, ooh, this is kind of fun. Look, I just like won $2 or something, and then you're like, oh, let's go in for again.
I think teenagers would be susceptible if that's what their friends are doing, peer pressure.
But I think a lot of like party people probably get into it. People who do things for the risk, for the thrill.
There's a lot of like the Australian culture does revolve around, you know, playing a game of poker with your friends, getting someone a scratchy ticket for their birthday, or playing the pokies in the pub. Like, that is a really normalised and socially acceptable part of our culture. It draws people in that one time, and then that's when addiction can start. What would you say or do if your best friend was doing it tough?
That's a hard one. I think I would definitely be there to support them.
I don't think I would jump straight to the point of, you know, helping them out, as in like giving them money or something. I'd like, you know, give them advice, like you said. If they're in a situation where they've been gambling and that's caused them to get to this point, you know, you might not trust them with your money, because, you know, they might go, like, you might give them money to help them like get better, but they might lie and use that again to just keep the addiction going.
I think if they were someone underage, like if I found out my best friend now at this age was struggling with an addiction like that, I would probably encourage them to reach out to a professional or their parents or someone, or if it was really bad, maybe I would go to someone for them.
I think definitely keeping some supervision on them, maybe saying to their close family and friends, hey, I just found out this person is gambling, it might be becoming a bit of a problem, could you just keep an eye on them, maybe give them a bit of advice?
So I would just really advise them, get help, you need it. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible stuff.
Wasn't it great, Billy? It took me back to when we were filming on the day, and I can remember just being blown away, and the two of us looking across at each other, just going, where do these guys know this stuff from? Like, they were really insightful.
Yeah. It's taken me 7 years to learn about the complexities and various aspects around gambling harm and you know, its integration into our culture, and these kids just knew it. You know, they covered it. They covered it all. Yeah.
They were just so aware of what was happening, all the tricks and everything. Yeah, It was amazing.
I think as someone who's had that lived experience, it really gives us hope. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I can see how emotional it is for you, Bianca. And, you know, Billy and I really felt that on the day. And it is really hopeful seeing youth who have, you know, that real awareness and being able to speak to it in a really knowledgeable way. And knowing, I was really captured by, you know, how they wanted to offer support at the end as well. Like, they had real insights into directing people to services, but being mindful that, you know, even though they may want to help, that some of their helping patterns may enable behaviours that are unhelpful for other people.
I think, you know, I was 16 when I started gambling, and the pokies were quite new then. They hadn't been around for long. And for me, even 15 and 16 years later of still gambling in that cycle, to seek help was really hard. And, you know, that shame and the stigma of thinking, what are people going to think of me? And knowing that society is going to label me as someone with an addiction, it was just extremely hard. and hearing those youth talk about, you know, that stigma, it just wasn't even there. Yeah, it's encouraging.
Yeah, and that is the challenge there, Bianca. I think you really, and so did our young people on the screen there, where it's so inherent in our culture, you know, our Australian sort of culture, and normalized. And kids these days are growing up with absolute access to online platforms and online mediums, and I would argue that that's making accessibility to activities like gambling so much easier to do. You know, at the same time, I think it's important to acknowledge the beautiful and brilliant connection and connecting opportunities that it does provide. You know, there are some positives in there, like the gatherings that do occur, whether like our young people spoke about, whether around games of poker, or whether it is at a gaming venue where people are gathering particularly to have fun in a controlled and yeah, really social sort of way. But it is complex because on that continuum, there's a harmful end of the spectrum, a harmful end that these young people are you know, quite aware of. You know,
And I think the hardest challenge is the onus is put on. It was put on me. I had to gamble responsible, and everyone said, "Just stop." I couldn't actually stop. How many times I tried and thought I'll never go there again. I couldn't just stop doing that. And help and getting that help was the only thing that really started that recovery journey for me.
Yeah.
Do you think that, oh, sorry, Katie.
Please go, Billy.
Yeah. I was wondering, do you think that younger people are more informed?
From that video, absolutely. You know, I'm sitting here reflecting now, maybe earlier on, they didn't know what harm was going to cause to people, and they'd only been around for a year or two when I started gambling. And, you know, there's more people coming out now and actually putting their hand up and being brave and saying, this is my story and it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't define me. It's part of what's made me who I am. And, you know, there's just more awareness out there and more people are talking about it. And it's fantastic that we're able to do that now in a safe environment.
It's almost like we've got two parallels here where you know, young people are having access and actually our whole world is accessing online platforms and mediums more readily in our modern day world. And you know, in combination with that, they're having more access to information, so maybe becoming and being more aware because of that access to information. But at the same time, maybe they are more vulnerable because they're, you know, receiving ongoing and endless pop-ups through social media. You know, YouTube videos, having like with short advertisements to sports betting companies and other apps. You know, and that's not even to mention the gamblification of games and in-game gambling that does occur. And so, you know, what others think about this parallel, these two, yeah, sort of paths that young people are living in?
Well, I mean, you know, Billy, what's really relevant at the moment is the fact we all know in Adelaide we've been locked down, hard lockdown for six days. And, you know, this may be a bit more relevant as we start talking about the gaming side of things, but also, you know, there's those access to gambling apps. And we've got people now at home who may be struggling with thinking of things to do, struggling with dealing with the idea of being home for 6 days. And so it's easy to be triggered or lured into, like you said, these advertisements that come up. And so I can't help but wonder, you know, what the effects of, for us, we maybe be able to start seeing statistics from other states and other countries. But for us in Adelaide, it's really hit us quite hard right now. And I would be curious to see how online gambling and gaming potentially increases at this time.
Yeah, and that is a really interesting curiosity to hold in our minds. I think for everyone tuning in today to this webinar session, it's important to think about. Obviously, this is a topic area that you're curious about. And so, yeah, we'd like to encourage viewers out there to hold on to that curiosity that, Katie, you've highlighted as being so important. Because activities like gambling and gaming can be incredibly isolating. At the harmful end of the spectrum, people are escaping real-world problems and real-world distresses and different imbalances in their lives, and using gambling in that space to escape. And so that's at that really harmful end of the spectrum. And I guess part of today's webinar session is to promote some awareness around that. So viewers leave with a little bit more information, a little bit more informed, and hopefully you feel enthused to filter on that information from today's webinar session. And actually, speaking of which, Katie, could you tell us a little bit about the tip sheets we've got available?
Yeah, so beautiful digital interface master Simon should have had those up for you as a link to be able to access the tip sheets. And what we'd really like to encourage you to do is really through that Q&A box down the bottom, we're inviting you at the end of this to ask any questions, anything that you feel that we may not have covered or captured, or adding to something that you've seen today that you'd like to know a little bit more about from either of our panelists or either Billy or myself. I suppose, but before we go to the next video, what I really want to highlight is that, Billy, the term you used in relation to gambling and gaming being on a spectrum, because there can quite often in the community and in homes and in people's own minds be this really black and white, good and bad perception. But it does sit on a spectrum, and we need to be really mindful of that when we're looking at where we're going from the maybe positive aspects to those more harmful aspects, and where is that space to intervene. And, maybe Bianca can speak to this later in our Q&A session, because we will start our gaming video in just a few moments. But, how do you know when you've reached that point? So just some curiosities, and we invite you to use that Q&A box as we go into our second video on gaming.
How much time does it take to become a professional gamer?
How much time does it take?
I don't even know this one.
I guess that depends how good you are and what you have access to.
It does depend on the person and the game you're playing.
Kind of just got to find a way to get your foot in the door to get there, I guess.
You've got to keep pushing out as much content as possible so that people don't become bored waiting for you to come out with something, and you just got to keep on trying and keep on being happy with your work.
Yeah. Being seen for being good at the game.
Some people will become an overnight success, and other people will work for years to earn their success.
What does it take to be a professional streamer? Definitely a camera.
Dedication and passion.
Charisma, a good personality that people want to watch.
You got to get the following, so you got to put out the content regularly, try and get your own little niche.
I also think you need to play a variety of games. You can't just play one game.
And it doesn't need to be so much professional as well. It's just to be good at the game, you could just be funny, and anything in media, it's a form of media and it's just entertainment really.
You have to be, I would say, a good influencer too, and you have to be,
you need to know how to market yourself.
Have the equipment as well, like a good mic, good camera, whatever you need for how you're going to stream, because it's all about quality, and people will watch videos with really good quality over really homemade, low budget ones.
How much is too much?
Too much is to the point where you're not going to bed.
If you're gaming sort of 24/7.
I would say too much is staying in your room for hours.
It can become an addiction.
If you are doing so many hours to the point where you're not enjoying what you're doing anymore. I feel like that's too much.
It's interrupting like schoolwork or even jobs like that you're doing. If it's interrupting that much of your life and like going out being social, honestly, it gets to be a bit of a problem.
I know people that get really into the game, they get really competitive and they'll just go and go again, and they'll get angry and rage because they failed and they'll just keep doing it.
What's life like when you game every day? I guess it kind of depends on like how much a day you are gaming.
I think as long as it's not interrupting your life, it's a hobby.
I don't really see the problem as long as you're not doing it to the point where it harms you.
I think it could probably become very lonely.
It can be very unhealthy. It could be tiring.
You miss out on a lot of what makes life and living when you're so focused on these games.
Poor sleep, poor eating,
hygiene.
Not enough time outside.
Yeah.
As long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, do whatever you want.
Why do some people play more than others?
Well, it just might be their thing. It might not be others.
Other people just have more free time than others, and that's pretty much all it is.
Some people like gaming, some people like drawing, reading, crafting. I guess it's like a hobby thing.
It's another hobby, really? That's how I view it, at least.
What's your hobbies?
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends I've grown up with who are very shy and don't engage socially with a lot of people, and so they're the types to stay at home more.
Depends on their personality. It is also an addiction. Some people are more susceptible to that than others.
Some people say that gaming leads to social isolation. What do you say? It really depends if you take breaks or not.
Yeah, I think it definitely does.
I think it can do that. Like, sometimes it depends, again, on just all sorts of different things that come into play.
Games can connect us and games can be very social activities, but they can also put a barrier in between us and the people in our life.
Yeah.
I think there's like two types of social interactions. There's like the one online gaming where you're chatting to people through a headset or via like typing in the chat. And there's like that side, but you can be a different you online, I guess.
If you had a message for parents, what would it be?
Don't force your kids not to play games if they want to play games. Let them have that freedom.
Try to manage their time and how much they are on it, but then again, it's not always a bad thing that they're doing it, because there are all sorts of games that like puzzle solving that help with brain thinking and all sorts of like other stuff. Like,
put guidelines in place as to, like, say, do your homework first and then you can game as like a reward for doing your homework.
It's okay to play games, but you need to have a break. What sort of gambling elements exist in games?
Loot boxes. Games like Fortnite is just random what you get into it.
You can get different skins for your characters and different abilities, but you have to buy them outside of the game, so that can be quite costly.
So sometimes it's like really, really good, sometimes it's really, really bad, and that's like a gambling sort of aspect of that chance.
A lot of games are set up to make you pay real money to buy in-game currency or different features for the games.
Like, the game can be free, but then the stuff in that game you still have to pay for, so that way they can make money to add stuff to the game, because you're not gonna, like, it's still a business and people gotta make money somehow.
There's a lot of games out there that can become competitive, and in that way you can start making bets and betting on these games, and that can be quite unhealthy.
Wow. I don't know about you and Bianca and James. What do you feel about seeing that?
Oh, that was just a lot. There was just so much in there. Wow, I scribbled down a couple of notes, but there's just so much to unpack there. Like, the first point was the first couple of questions, how they were talking about pro gaming and streaming and basically turning gaming into a career, and like how different that is from when I started out as a 10-year-old kid just playing a Super Nintendo, you know, for fun. It's just evolving at just a rapid rate, and it's just, I guess that's another lure, isn't it, that you can actually turn gaming into a job, really. So yeah, there was that. There was the addiction level, and some similar experiences, I guess, there that I had and can talk about a little bit. Also, just how normalised and accepting they seem to be about the whole gaming, compared to the gambling, which I think had a much more negative sort of vibe to it. They saw it as a problem. The gaming, there was a lot of ums and ahs, and this is good, or this isn't necessarily bad. It was just so much more grey, I guess. So it was good that they could see the positives in gaming, and I guess that generation is just used to it being a part of their lives. Yeah, man, just so much in there.
You're so right in James, your mention of the evolution of gaming. And I too remember playing a SNES back in the day. The graphics were terrible.
Yeah.
The controller was clunky, you know. And then you've got, contrastingly, esports, which is $1 billion industry. You have thousands of viewers. You've got famous sporting celebrities endorsing teams. You've got universities internationally, foregoing enrollment fees for students who have particular skills in esports, electronic sports, and it's humongous and just growing. So, talk about that evolution.
I think I'd be showing I'm going to show my age. I mean, I'm admittingly not much of a gamer these days, but like I started with a thing called ColecoVision, and I can remember playing Cabbage Patch games. And so to hear children talking about, like youth talking about streaming and what it means to like build a profile, and, you know, that creation of identity that happens around, you know, because we all remember, well, I'd like to think we can all remember being that age, that early developmental stage, and how uncertain it is sort of navigating your way through the world. And, you know, we hear and see from youth these days how they can create an online identity. You know, it connects people, it's exciting, and it can promote a real sense of belonging. So I think, like you said, James, the youth in the video really identified some of those positive aspects. And, you know, Billy, what are your thoughts around those aspects and those, you know, the things that we find scientifically that occur?
Yeah. I guess maybe similar to gambling, that immersiveness or addictiveness of a game is actually what gamers look for. Where they're out there searching for that. They're out there searching for games that you know, feel beautiful. You know, that are those fantasy worlds of incredible dragons and other creatures. You know, you adopt this character who has superpowers and connects on all these levels with other players in the game. And it's brilliant. It's stimulating for us. And I think in this recording project, I remember one of our young people comparing playing a game to watching a movie. Actually, they do have produced movie clips from role-playing games, and they, you know, game creators have merged all the short films that feature throughout a game and created movies of them. And it's interesting to watch. It's really immersive and really, you know, really catchy. And so, again, here we've got a complex issue which people connect with, or a complex activity which people connect with on a lot of different levels. There are a lot of different factors within here. And, you know, on that note around parents and the message for parents, I was wondering, Bianca, I can see you smiling. What are your thoughts around that? Okay.
I have a 12-year-old, And I was really quite conflicted when he all of a sudden wanted to start doing all this gaming, because I could see the similarities in the gambling and the behaviour. And I didn't want to isolate him though from his friends. And I really couldn't understand why, if he's been at school all day with his friends, he then wanted to spend another 4 hours online talking in the headset gaming. So I made a decision at the time to actually game with them as a way to use it as a connection point, so that I felt safe, I could monitor what he was doing and he could feel safe. And it became really interesting space, because the other parents knew that I was gaming with them and they felt a bit more safer with the kids doing that. You know, Fortnite was all the rage at the time. They were in these games with other people talking on a headset that we didn't even know who they were. They wanted to buy all these loot boxes and spend all these money on skins. And if they didn't have that skin, you know, it was, well, you're an out because you're not, you know, you don't have the same skin as what we do, or you're a noob, or whatever the, you know, category is that they call them. But I found it, you know, really insightful and helpful, because I realized that as they were gaming, they were actually just talking about day-to-day things at school that they didn't know how to say to each other face to face. And I guess, you know, I make sure, given that I know the harm I had with gambling, that I have really strict things in place for my kids and monitor it as much as I can, but try and keep it as something that's actually a connection for us, not something that's going to cause a barrier because of my concerns in the crossover with the gaming and gambling.
Wow, Bianca, you're an incredible role model to parents out there, and I do hope there are some parents connecting in here today and who may be able to connect with your experiences and how you approach this challenging issue for a lot of families.
I'm wondering, Billy, if this is a good time to connect into one of our participants who's asked a question. And I think it feeds into a little bit of what Bianca has just been talking about. Do you think that that's a good time for us to go into that now?
Yeah,
I'm happy to read out the question.
Yeah, let's invite participants connecting into the webinar today to start putting through some of those questions. We can continue talking as a whole, reminding you that we've got those tip sheets available here, and that we're also contactable outside of this webinar session too. If you did have some other questions that maybe didn't emerge for you today, but do so following the session.
Yeah, beautiful. So that might, I'll let that lead us into the, one of the questions that we have. So we've got an international participant with us today. She is a teacher at an international school in Malaysia. She says, we've spent a total of 4 months this year with schools closed and students learning online. So there's people who've had it a lot tougher than us, hey? We've had students and parents report that gaming is more of a problem when learning online, and students are having difficulty staying in a routine, often staying up very late to game and not turning up to classes in the morning. She asks, what can we do as teachers to support students and parents limit gaming when they aren't seeing them face to face?
James, I'm wondering if some of your experiences here as a younger gamer might connect in with part of this question.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably a little bit older when I was avoiding my studies with gaming, but a similar sort of thing, I guess. I guess for me, gaming was always an escape, and it was somewhere to go when things weren't going well in other aspects of life. So I guess if you're understanding why people are gaming, that's probably a good place to start. because there's a whole range of different reasons and factors, and there probably isn't one answer that anyone could give you for the whole classroom. Some kids could be avoiding being bullied online, in person, terrible situations at home, like whatever it is. Others could just be doing it for fun, just to connect with their mates. So I think obviously the parents are going to play a role in it. So I guess the teachers are going to have to work with the parents and talking about, like Bianca mentioned, with boundaries in place. So probably the other thought that I had is if the rest of your life is really engaging, if you have other things going on, I always found that gaming sort of took a bit of a backseat for me. So I guess trying to make your sessions as engaging and as interesting to the students as possible, and maybe you could bring elements of fun or mild forms of gamification into the classroom to keep them engaged that way. So yeah, that was some of the thoughts I had.
Some really great points there, James. And you speak to what Billy was saying before about this being on a spectrum. You know, it's going to be different for everybody, and we understand that. And I think this is a really good time to acknowledge that, you know, we are going to be using this video to go into schools to start talking to students and teachers. Sorry for our international representatives. That's not going to be possible, although we would love it to be once restrictions lift. You know, going into schools to introduce this topic and start getting youth to talk about it, and also bring in one of our training modalities, which is stepping up to gaming. So this will all be happening in the new year, hopefully as restrictions lift over here, and we can start really going out and spreading this to the broader school community.
Yeah, and Katie, James's point, and as you highlighted around the spectrum or continuum here, is that it's important to work with the family, you know, to take that holistic approach. I think similarly to gambling, society hones down on the person who's not navigating life as best as they could be, you know, who is struggling, who does have that imbalance or is drawing upon something to cope. And I think it's important to step back and to, as James was talking about, connect with the other aspects of that dynamic, you know, and to bring that curiosity to the situation as well. And for us here at Relationships Australia, it does mean working with the whole family and the school community, as opposed to just that individual who's been identified as having a tough time and going it tough.
I'm wondering, Bianca, do you have anything else that you can add to that space, being a mother that's really involved in that presence? You said you have some very clear and you did call them firm boundaries. Do you have anything else to add that may be able to support our teachers and caregivers out there?
I think the important thing to know is it's not actually always easy. You know, I'm a bad mum. I get told he hates me. But that's just part of being a pre-teenager, I think, as well. And he knows where he stands and where I stand on the issue. So I'm not unreasonable with, I came quite hard, quite fast, and he was obviously upset about that. So we actually worked out that together about, you know, well, what do you think's okay? An amount of time that's okay, and what times might that be? And, you know, what games do you think are inappropriate? And, you know, giving him some of those decision making so that he felt involved and that it wasn't just me going, no, you're not doing this. And yeah, I guess like James said, his school knew that there was a lot of gaming talk and things, so they kind of incorporated some of their lessons to make it engaging so that they would be involved of, okay, we're going to do some loot box, you know, we're going to create a loot box for a project or things like that. So they actually didn't really want a game, because then they were talking about maybe what they were going to create or make. So there's, you know, I think just being creative, and as you know, it's pretty clear it's very much here to stay, and finding a way to bring that in that isn't going to be harmful, and that there are positives, you know, to this as well, and getting that right balance, really.
Bianca, what an incredible suggestion in response to that Q&A question. And I think it also connects to Katie's earlier question around the science behind different aspects of gaming, because loot boxes do rely on that variable ratio schedule, as our young people were aware of in our gaming clip. And I think bringing awareness and experiencing it for yourself in the classroom is, you know, there's no better way, I think, to promote knowledge. And as you said, Bianca, promote young people being the masters of their life, you know, to promote that sense of agency, and to empower young people to make informed decisions, as opposed to just going along with the horde and the masses and conforming, to peer pressures.
Yeah, and you know what I heard, Billy, in that as well is, Bianca, without really, you know, maybe realizing what you've done is have those hard boundaries in line. Like, this is what we can do, but then, as I heard Billy say, offering your children that sense of agency. Okay, here's the hard boundary, but what are we going to do to negotiate in between there? And you get an opportunity as the child and the parent to work on those negotiating skills within those firmer boundaried spaces. And that's really important for children, to be able to have, like Billy said, that sense of agency with something that actually is really enjoyable for them. But Billy, I believe there's also another question that's come through.
Yeah, and I think Chris here, our head of Family and Children's Services at Relationships Australia, has asked, I guess it is helpful to acknowledge the positives about gambling in terms of connection, strategy, teamwork, etc., before talking about the downsides, where they haven't got the balance, isn't right, and it is harming them. Question here is, what has worked when you have worked with young people and their families? And I think we've started entering this space here, Chris, in the presentation, where upon Bianca's experiences and James' experiences and the conversation that we've been having here has suggested that putting yourself in your children's shoes or young people's shoes, and really trying to get it, you know, understand and get it from their perspective. You know, why is it important to them? You know, what is it that's hooking them in so much? You know, what is it that's causing them to miss school, to stay up late, to not rock up to their job? What is it for them particularly and individually? I think as a parent, it's also important to approach things from a really calm and collected place. You know, those heated arguments or heated moments in family sort of times is not a fantastic time to approach a complicated topic like this one. I think parents also, or primary caregivers and even teachers to this extent, have to promote realistic expectations, and really role model those ones too. I think we hear and see in the communities and families we work with that there's some inconsistency there. You know, high level of expectation around boundary setting, but when we turn to the parents, that's not really being mirrored in what they're suggesting, encouraging, or even insisting happen. And I think that can be really problematic. I think young people need to see that you're on board with them. You know, you're a part of this challenging theme as well, and you really care because you're going to stick to what we have agreed to. And I think Bianca's beautiful experiences here speak to that last aspect, what we at Relationships Australia, in our holistic approach, try and promote. And that's to use screen time and screens as a connection point, as opposed to a disconnection point. You know, even if you don't like it. And that's probably a really challenging message to hear for our viewers out there. Yeah, James and Bianca and Katie, did you have any more thoughts about Chris's question here?
I was just wondering, Billy, one of the things, and I'm wondering whether this feeds into it, one of the things James mentioned earlier was, you know, his realization around maybe when, or his experience around using gaming, and when he's recognized that there have been points where it may have been becoming excessive and interfering in his life, and whether maybe some insights from you, James, about that personal identification in yourself might be helpful for people out there to get a better understanding while they're watching, because it is that, like we said, that continuum, really challenging in that middle point to know, are we still in that safe, positive space, or have we now tipped over? Do you have anything, James, that you feel like that you can add to that?
I think it's really easy to just start off really casually and just doing it for all the good reasons and getting all the positives out of it. And before you even know what's happened, you're staying up until 4 a.m. You're waking up at 6 a.m. You're just hooked. I don't think that I had a really strong single moment of recognize, like when I realized that it was an unmanageable point, I guess. It's sort of just always been there, and it's something that I guess as life fluctuates and things get better and worse, you just dip into it a little bit more, or you come out of it. So it's not, for me at least, it wasn't that it was just on the up. It was increasing, and then all of a sudden it reached a point where I just stopped and got better. That's not what it's about at all. It's like a continual realization, I guess. Yeah.
I'm hearing you say that constant checking in, and I suppose, you know, for people out there, we can relate that to anything. It might be we notice that we've spent, you know, too many days or weeks in a row doing overtime at work, and that's imposing on other areas of our lives, or going to the gym, or overeating, or whatever it may be. So what I'm hearing you say is it's that having that knowledge, and I suppose that
self-awareness as well. Yeah.
Self-awareness and that introspection to be able to, and this is where we, as, you know, caregivers, teachers and parents and other types of carers for youth, it's important for us to help youth find that balance within themselves and that reflection point, because it's not necessarily something we're born with or that we know how to do instinctively. And I think Billy really captured that when he spoke about modelling. How do we as parents, because if we're constantly sitting there with our phones up in our faces on Facebook, or I can't think of anyone's at the time yet. I'm only on Facebook, that's how daggy I am. We're not teaching children how to step away from devices. So what are we doing to role model healthier behaviours?
Yeah, great responses there, James and Katie. And as we've been talking, I've seen another question pop up, so I will just read one out from Anna here. Malaysia is a majority Muslim country, and gambling is illegal here. Our Muslim students don't really understand what gambling is, except its harm and taboo. How can we raise their awareness on what it is and how gambling might be coming through in their gaming? Yeah, another great question. So I think we started to touch on this topic a little earlier on in our Q&A section. And just another reminder for viewers out there that we do have tip sheets. We've got information there for young people, for parents, and even for teachers. So to access those as resources, and to also to stay in touch with us, because we can continue this conversation. It doesn't have to end at the end of our webinar session today. So Anna, we talked about the gamblification of games. You know, there's a lot of grooming that goes along, goes into advertising, specific targeting and sensationalization of people, role models, you know, personas through a lot of ads. So the gamblification of games is an emerging issue in our perspective, and something to be aware of. So we've got games that simulate real gambling activities. We've got Rules of a Poker Machine featuring in games like Slotomania, you know, an app you can purchase on your smart device. We have games like Grand Theft Auto, which for the main character is an option to access a casino, you know, which resembles all aspects of a casino, and invites the player to gamble using in-game credit. You know, so I think experiential-based learning, as Bianca was sharing that point earlier on, is a fantastic option. But it starts with a conversation. I think part of awareness raising is acknowledging that this is a potential issue, something to be aware of, something to have a conversation about. I think engaging others in this topic is important. I think that being really, I guess, curious about how that education space looks is important, and being creative. Like what better way to learn about loot boxes than to create your own? And I think a challenge that we face here is that, you know, potentially in a lot of schools, the standpoint that by talking about the issue, we're going to promote further harm occurring in our student group. And it's a challenging one. An idea is that kids are already talking about this. They're already doing it. So by us talking about it and engaging them in that conversation, it's not going to do further harm, but actually raise awareness, you know, open a line of conversation and communication, and invite young people to be accountable for the decisions that they make from that informed standpoint.
Mm. And also, I think adding on that, Billy, you know, building on that idea of naming things for what they are. So looking at things, talking to students about, you know, what are microtransactions? What do they mean? What do they bring up for you? What are in-app purchases? You know, and sometimes just naming these things for children. Do you realize that this is a form of gambling? Mm. Is or isn't it a form of gambling for you? What do you understand about that? And if it is, why is it? You know, especially with the question that Anna asked around children who don't have that understanding of what gambling is because of being in predominantly Muslim countries. Start introducing things like the microtransactions, the in-app purchases and the loot box as forms of gambling. I'm wondering what James and Bianca, as we go into our closing, I mean, or Billy, are we at that point where we need to finish things up?
I think we do need to finish things up. I'm wary that our webinar session might quickly end. Okay. And so before we do that, I think it's important to thank our panel members here, James and Bianca, for bringing some of your lived experience and teaching us about this complicated space. Acknowledging True North Theatre Ensemble for volunteering their time and energy into these beautiful and brilliant and powerful resources. Thank you to co-host Katie as well, Relationships Australia. We've got our digital interface master here who's helped all the IT side of this webinar session be successful and actually not have any glitches and hiccups, which is surprising. But maybe this time around we've got a better sense of what it means to be in lockdown and to be virtual. So continue the conversation. Our duty line is accessible for further questions. You can connect with us on a number of different levels around these complicated topics, gambling and gaming. So please tune in, please connect with us at Relationships Australia, South Australia.